Hey everyone, I'm Alex, and welcome to The Roasted Mind, the show where we enjoy some coffee, have a conversation about self-help, personal interests, and growth, and express the thoughts that can be a bit harder to discuss. So, have a seat, grab a cup of coffee, let's talk. Good morning, everybody. Another Saturday, another day to have coffee, sit down, and talk about really everything that's kind of on our mind. Today, I got a seasonal drink. I specifically went to a local coffee shop named Vesta Roasters, one of the best in the city. And I had got a masala chai that they said was on their menu for seasonal, and I added 3 shots of espresso just because I really needed that coffee kick. Had a really early day today. Got things started in the beginning of the day super early, like at 5 p.m. I'm making pizza tonight, so I had to get the dough ready, and it's gonna turn out great. I'm really excited, but of course I needed some coffee, so I got the masala with a triple shot espresso, and I have to say it's pretty delicious. It's a different take from a regular chai that you can get from, let's say, like a Starbucks, quote unquote regular, that you get at a Starbucks or maybe at a Dutch Bros, where those are more like milkier, creamier chais that don't specifically insinuate the spices that are typically found in this drink. But this masala chai, it really does wake me up, even without the espresso, because it's hard to say. It's so bright and spicy, but not in the sense of like, jalapeno spicy, but it's like, okay, it has the cardamom, it has the ginger, it has all those spices that go into a drink. And so I'm really enjoying this. Today's episode is going to be based off seasonal drinks. And I say this because I got the inspiration when I specifically was looking for a seasonal drink at Vesta. And so I went and I texted one of my friends. I said, hey, what seasonal drinks are at Vesta? I saw you were there yesterday. And he tells me, well, he doesn't really know. He said he doesn't really remember, but that the food there was good. So I go, I check it out. I've been there before. And this is a place where they usually have about four different drinks per season, 4 or 5 different drinks. And so this season for the winter, I want to say it's winter season now, they have a dark chocolate mocha. They have a campfire type latte. They had a Fruit Loop matcha, which is very interesting, a matcha with the flavor of Fruit Loops. And then they had this masala chai. So I got the masala chai. But there are also other places that offer different seasonal drinks. And it depends on the season, of course, quote unquote, the name seasonal. Whereas places like Starbucks will have a peppermint mocha. Pete's also has a peppermint mocha. Everywhere is going to have a pumpkin spice latte for the fall. Go back to winter and you have an eggnog latte, or of course, the peppermint mocha latte is going to be in the winter. Then you can go to summertime, and they usually have a citrusy drink on the menu. Vesta also has one that's very sour, but it's incredibly delicious, and it grows on you. It really does grow on you. And in the springtime, a lot of places like to have a rose water latte or a lavender latte. And so it really does depend on your mood and kind of the season at which you want to get these drinks. And I always recommend finding, first and foremost, when you're finding a new coffee shop, a staple, I always recommend trying your go-to drink. I always recommend saying, well, hey, I want a flat white with oat milk and honey, in my case, just to see if you like their espresso, you like how they make their drinks. And then the next visit, then you can go out of the box and try a seasonal drink. Or if you want to start in the beginning, it's your coffee, your way you do it. That's all on you. Seasonal drinks are really, they kind of showcase, in a sense, what this place can offer, what this coffee shop can offer. But I don't really think they're accurate tellings of, hey, this is the quality of this shop, because they're making a specific drink for you, and a drink that they've tested, a drink that they've tried, they worked on multiple times. And so you're not really getting the consistency of that shop, because you're getting a drink that they only make 3 months of the year, 2 months in the year. So I recommend trying out your go-to, your staple. But if you want to try a seasonal drink that they have, something that interests you, I highly recommend doing that as well. There's nothing wrong with trying what you want to try. So go ahead and get that peppermint mocha or that pumpkin spice from this new shop that you've been dying to try but just haven't had the time to go to. Seasonal affective disorder is something that isn't necessarily very talked about, but we all kind of feel it. You know, it's that feeling of when the weather gets gloomy and your mind starts to get clouded and you start to feel sad for whatever reason, or you start to feel like you're having deeper thoughts, or you're just not the same as it is when it's summertime. And there's a reason for that. A lot of that is because of the lack of sun, the gloomier weather. They call it winter blues. And so, because of this, that's why in the summertime you hear a lot of hype music, fun music. You see a lot of fun shows. You do this and that. You can go out more, be outside more. In the winter time, it's the complete opposite. You're more indoors where it's warm. You step outside and it's dark super early, dark super late. No, early in the day. Yeah, yeah. It's dark by like 4 p.m. The weather's cold. You're not outside as much. Maybe there's snow where you're at. Maybe there's overcast. And of course, the more north you go, the kind of colder it's going to be, the gloomier it's going to be. That's why this is a form of depression that is around a lot in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, where it's gloomy all the time, where it rains constantly, and where the cold weather is in abundance up there. 90% of seasonal affective disorder, otherwise known as SAD, funny enough, is occurring more in the fall and winter. Of course, the colder months, the gloomier months, with about 10% in the summer or spring. And I'm not entirely too sure what that could be. I think that's more akin to personal preference at that point. Maybe you don't really suffer from SAD, but you like the fall months. And so you really hate the summer and springtime, kind of like myself. I hate the summer. I hate the summer. I love spring. I love fall, the in between months. Winter is really nice, but summer I could honestly do without the constant heat and the sweat and all the expectations from everybody else. But this is a disorder that is more recognizable in adults, and it's more recognizable in adults. As I said, the more north you go, and some of the symptoms you can have are symptoms that include oversleeping. Maybe you're feeling irritable. Maybe you're feeling angry. Of course, you're more sad. Maybe you're eating more, so there's weight gain. I was also reading that in the summertime, it can be the opposite. So you're eating less and there's weight loss. There's also withdrawal from social situations. You want to stay inside more. You don't want to talk to other people. You just want to keep to yourself because that's kind of really the only way you can cope with the season. That's really the only way you can cope with yourself and how you think of that season and what that season makes you think of. And so, it's kind of some quote unquote treatments for this, things you can do to help. Of course, there isn't going to be a surefire, one top solution that's going to cure it forever and ever because the seasons change and moods change and people change. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that you're in trouble. That doesn't mean that you're a nuisance. It just means that you're human and that your moods change just like everything else. So, why is it okay for hobbies and interests to change, but not your mood? You know? So some of these treatments can include antidepressant medication, but I feel like that should be kind of like, you want to see a specialist for that. That shouldn't be your first resort. More sun, vitamin D is one of the big and easiest things that can help with seasonal affective disorder. Going outside and seeing the bright of day, getting that sun feeling on your skin, that kind of warmth, radiant feeling on the goosebumps of the cold weather. That's incredible, and I'm kind of like envying being up there in the Pacific Northwest now, just thinking about feeling that. Another of course viable option is therapy. Therapy is always going to be a viable option. That's always going to be an option that, yeah, maybe not a lot of us are vocal about and verbal about and really can open up and say, I'm doing therapy and I'm talking to somebody, but that option is always there. And if you don't have somebody to talk to, of course you have a therapist. If you have insurance, a lot of them are covered from insurance. I would definitely say it's a good way. A lot of these providers do also online treatments. You don't need to go anywhere. You can talk to them from the comfort of your own home, from your car, wherever you feel comfortable. But there can also be kind of table side therapy. Not really a licensed therapist, but one of your friends, one of your closest friends, people that you really trust, somebody that you could talk to, somebody that you can really open up to and use that as not as a tool, but as an outlet. I like that word, as an outlet to really talk about and say, hey, well, I'm not feeling so good and I think it's the weather, or I'm not feeling so good and here's why. Here's what's been on my mind lately. A simple coffee talk like you and me. that can work wonders in this overall broad spectrum of seasonal affective disorder. And so I highly recommend you do that. I highly recommend you take that option. Speaking from personal experience, I kind of want to talk about not my journey, but my way of kind of coping with seasonal affective disorder. Because in Vegas, it doesn't necessarily get gloomy all the time. We'll maybe have a day out of a week or every 2 weeks or something that gets really gloomy. Maybe it rains. It's really nice. It's a nice contrast. But then in the wintertime or even the fall time, it just gets bright. The weather is still there, but it's bright outside. So you seemingly sometimes find yourself wearing a t-shirt instead of a sweater, just because the sun is always kind of blaring down on you. And so I wouldn't say that most people here suffer from the disorder. Of course, like I mentioned, the more north you go, the more common it is. But I do kind of have this, I don't want to say it's an awakened mind, because that's very cheesy and that's not entirely true. But I do find myself to be more insightful during the winter and fall months when it gets colder. And I'm not really emphasizing so much on outside expectations because of summer or springtime. I'm not focusing on going out and taking my full advantage of the day. I think maybe that's what it is that when you're inside more, you have more time to think. And when you have more time to think, more ideas start to pop up in your head. And that's what I use for the fall and winter. I kind of use those colder months to take effect and take advantage of my mind and really start to think, well, maybe I can start doing this. Maybe I can start doing that. Maybe I can plan. But that's not to say that I don't sometimes feel lazy because of the cold weather. That's not to say that I sometimes don't feel like I can just sit down and, play video games or watch a movie marathon or something all day, because that's completely true. And I shouldn't feel bad for doing that because that's what I want to do that day, and hell, I typically and personally, I don't like to watch movies multiple times. I think like the max that I'll watch a movie, besides a once in a blue moon type of situation, is maybe like twice, 3 times. And then I'm kind of like, well, no, I already watched it. I already know what happens, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so I like to kind of take advantage of that, take advantage of my mind during the cold months that I'm inside. Maybe I'm practicing more of an instrument. Maybe I'm working more on this podcast now that this is the first time that I've had it for the winter and fall months. Anything like that. So that kind of contrasts right with what I feel in the spring and summertime. In the springtime, I feel like I want to go out more. I feel like I can go out more. I don't have to wear less to feel more comfortable. I can Sometimes it gets colder, other days it's warmer, but it just feels nice. And so I go out and I feel good. A lot of the flavors out there for coffee or a lot of the produce out there in the spring is immaculate and I love it. And then in the summertime, it's always hot. And you always go out and you feel like, well, shit, like I really do kind of have to hold myself up. I have to make sure I look good when I go out, or I kind of have to do this and that because other people expect me to do this and that. And that's just me. That's what I think of, and maybe I overthink it, and that can be part of like that, like I said, that 10% that suffers from summer and spring. And maybe that's me. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's me because I don't necessarily always feel my best during those months. I typically find myself feeling my best during the fall and winter months. But maybe I'm not a good judge of that character just because I live in Vegas, where it's not always gloomy and it's not always cold, and where the reality of seasonal affective disorder isn't as prevalent as it is in the northern countries, in the northern states, anything of that sort. But personally, I do find joy in the fall and winter because I can push myself mentally, because I can push myself in that way that I don't really do during the fall or the spring and summer months. Summer and spring are known always for weightlifting and looking your best and really trying to go out there. Maybe you're competing, maybe you're doing all these things. Where fall and winter is more, that's where the writers come out, and that's where the musicians really feel their best, when they have the blues going on or anything of that sort. And typically I've known people that have suffered from seasonal affective disorder, and I've known people that have taken medication, have talked to therapists, and have you know, done what they can to help, if not just dealt with it. And I can say that it's a very serious thing. As kind of silly as it sounds to let the weather control your mood, the weather is one of the only things that you cannot control. The weather is one of the things that you really have no control over. And so, what can you do? You start to feel gloomy, you start to feel sad, and maybe that's more pushed in because of expectations from media or from stories. Some things where you have these colder states that have sadder music, these colder countries that have sadder music, or the more pale gloom of the area around you is causing that because you feel gloom inside. I mean, look at writers like, this is going to be a given, but Edgar Allan Poe, right, who writes about darkness and gloominess all the time. It isn't without influence. It isn't without that influence of external factors. And it's kind of odd to say that these external factors kind of fuel who you are inside as much as you want to be self confident. And it sucks. It really does suck to feel yourself be influenced from other people that you've never met before or from something that you can't control. But I feel like that's kind of the beauty of it. When you start to challenge yourself and you start to say, well, no, maybe I'm not so sad. It's just the weather, and you kind of embrace it. In my case, I feel like I'll be at my quote unquote best when I can start to embrace the summer and spring months. And like I said, maybe it's because I live in a place that gets really hot during the summer and spring months. So I don't necessarily enjoy it here. But that doesn't mean that my experience in another state or in another country is going to be the same. So take it from me with a grain of salt. But I feel like when you start to enjoy the whole year round and you start to use it, and maybe you pull from your feelings from the fall and winter into the summer or spring, or vice versa. Maybe during those colder months, you want to work more on physical fitness. In those warmer months, you want to start writing, quote unquote, using your mind, unlocking your mind. And when you pull those together and you really start to draw inspiration from yourself, I think that's where you're going to get the most satisfaction. And I think that's where you're going to get the most kind of peace and calm. And maybe that's not the cure for seasonal depression. It doesn't have to be, but it's a cure for how you feel about the seasons. It's a cure for what you can do to get through those seasons that you hate so much or that you just think aren't as good as the other ones. You know, one thing I can say about seasonal changes is that the coffee, as kind of cheesy as this is, this is a coffee podcast and all this and that, but I really do enjoy the change of the flavors, and I really do enjoy the change of the seasons, and I think it really does keep it fresh. I really think that it keeps your mind fresh as well as your palate fresh in terms of coffee or in terms of your mental health. This kind of shifting of the moods and shifting of thought processes, because if you were to just keep on one baseline the entire year for years and years, how boring would that really be? Would there ever be any room for inspiration? Would there ever be any room for extra thought, for extrinsic as well as intrinsic influences? How influenced would you be from outside factors, and how much influence can you cause others? When you have that shift of moods, it really does open up new perspectives, and you start to think, well, perspective A, perspective B, let me choose one. Then you go to the next one, perspective C and D. And it's really cool that you can continue to build yourself from this change of seasons, just like you start to develop your change of taste from these different seasonal coffees that you try. I never really thought that I would enjoy a chai with espresso, and here I am drinking it. When I was growing up, I never thought that peppermint mocha would be my thing. I liked chocolate, but I wasn't really a fan of peppermint. And now it's one of my favorite drinks to have during the winter time. That sour citrus drink that I had from Vesta, in the April, I think I had it in April or May. I never thought I would enjoy an orange latte, but man, I kind of think about it, and I really hope that they have it again next year. This change of the tides, this change of the seasons, as hard as it can be to cope with, and as hard as it can be to either get help or to help yourself, I kind of do appreciate it. I kind of do see how it can be needed. Maybe not in a serious degree in the fact of quote unquote depression, but in terms of mental thought, in terms of stability and growth. This is an affective disorder that helps in a way. And maybe I'm not wording that right, maybe I'm not wording it because I stumbled on that word a bit, but I think that, like I said, the more you start to pull from point A, point B, season A, season B, the more you start to grow. The more you start to see yourself, your own perspective, maybe your own bias, maybe your own set of changes. Maybe you don't want to change and you want to stay the same, but you won't see that unless you give it a shot. And so I think maybe if I were to give it a shot, if I were to give summer or spring a shot, I would be able to grow. And maybe I can confirm that I don't really like this. Or maybe I can say, well, okay, maybe summer isn't that bad if I'm not living in a place that doesn't get up to like 120 degrees. But it's hard to stay positive during a topic like this. And I'm really trying to figure out what to say in terms of positivity for something that with the term of seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder or SAD. It really is tough. But I think the number one thing you can take away from anything that I've said on this is that there is help, is that seasonal affective disorder is not something that needs to be done alone. It is not something that you should be taking care of alone if it starts to hinder you. If you can get through it by yourself, that's great. That's awesome. And I mean, hell, I wish everybody had that mental stability of, no, I can do it by myself. It's cool. But there is help out there, whether it's a sense of just going out and getting some sun by yourself. Maybe it's therapy with a registered therapist or a close friend that you genuinely do trust and they trust you the same to have a cup of coffee and talk about and really do enjoy that time together, whether it's 2 hours or whether it's 30 minutes, however long it can be. And of course, there is always medications that is, it is available. There is that there. But I do feel like therapy is one of the most, well, therapeutic things you can do. Talk to a friend. Talk to somebody out there that can really help you, that you feel like could be at your benefit for this incredibly real and incredibly serious disorder known as SAD. I hope you all kind of get that chance to get help. This is a very common disorder, and this is very something that's really hard to stay positive about, but that doesn't mean that positivity can't grow from it. And so I hope that with the change of the seasons, the change of the tides, you start to grow and you start to not only understand yourself, but you start to get help in order to help understand yourself. You start to talk and see things through and realize the different changes that are out there in the world and how those changes can affect you and why they aren't always a bad thing. I think step number one is vitamin D. Go out and get the sun. Feel that radiant sun in your skin during the cold winter months. But I think it's very important to understand that, just like the change of seasons, the change of tides, change of mood, change of pace, it isn't permanent. And that's why seasonal affective disorder is seasonal. That seasonal depression isn't permanent. It's seasonal. And there is always help for something that is temporary. And yeah. So thank you again, everybody, for listening to today's episode. I really hope that you got a chance to listen to last week's episode. It's one that I'm very proud of, and I'm really glad that I got the chance to discuss with that topic over a really close friend of mine. So if you haven't, go take a listen. It's a little long, but I promise it's worth it. And I hope that as the weather changes and it kind of gets colder, you also have to put your puffer jacket on, your little Carhartt beanie, and you take full advantage of it. Okay? I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.